Tim, you're doing a series on Andrew Berry's draft trends, what we've seen, what it means for this year's draft. Three-part series. We'll go in depth a little bit on two of them, and then we'll preview the third one that's coming up next week. Take us through that first. And it's something we've talked about a couple of times, the age factor with Andrew Berry's draft picks.
Absolutely. And I mean, people that kind of follow this and follow the Browns pretty deeply understand that, this won't be a surprise to them when they hear this. But, part one, I talked about how Andrew Berry has leaned towards picking younger players in his 2 years as the general manager of the Browns. You look at these his two classes, he has not drafted a player older than 22 years old at the time they were picked. His first round picks, Jedrick Wills and Greg Newsome, they were 20 years old when they got drafted. So I think that's going to be something to watch for, as we get to the final weeks of the draft, as far as who the Browns could take. They've leaned younger. That's why, in these mock drafts that I've done, certain things, all this research, I've kind of been pivoting more towards players who are kind of 22 or younger. That seems like the limit. I know it could be tougher this year because this year you have more of these super seniors, these 6-year seniors who got that extra year of eligibility because of the pandemic and not every team being able to play in 2020. So it could be a little trickier to find those guys, but I feel like that's going to be something to watch is, if there's a tie between a couple players, is he going to lean younger? Because it makes sense to take younger players. I mean, contract length, they still have time, physically grow, physically mature a little bit, still time to develop while already having enough talent and skill to show that they can play in the National Football League. So there's a lot of reason that, they've gone for younger prospects, and I kind of think that trend will continue.
Now, part two of your trends was about schools. What'd you find out, and what are some things to keep in mind as far as the schools Andrew Berry's draft picks have come through?
Yeah, so part two, I looked at how the Browns have leaned towards Power 5 prospects. Now, every team does this by and large, and obviously it's understandable because the Power 5 schools have the most players. They usually have the best players. Now, I was doing I did a lot of deep research into all 32 teams. Andrew Berry's taken 15 players in the last two drafts. 13 of those have been Power 5 players. That's a percentage rate of about 86.7%, and that is tied for sixth in the NFL in that group. So the Chargers were a perfect 15 of 15, and way at the bottom, the Eagles went 12 for 19. And you contrast that with John Dorsey, who was the GM before Andrew Berry, had 16 picks in 2018 and 2019, took 10 Power 5 players. So that's 6 players from non-Power 5 schools, FCS, Division II, you name it. And that's a rate of about 62.5%, which would be lower than everybody else in 2020 and 2021. So, I mean, it's understandable why you want to do that because, I mean, they're not just the best players, they're going against the best competition on a weekly basis. So, I don't know. Again, you don't know how this is going to continue because, again, we're talking 2 years. He could do something. Andrew Berry could do something completely different in 2 years. But when you look at where he's gone, there's been a heavy Power 5 leaning. And, that's a trend that makes a lot of sense again, and certainly something that I'm kind of keep an eye on, obviously, how that plays out again in this 22 draft class.
And the third part of that series on Andrew Berry's draft trends will be coming out next week as well, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I won't give any spoilers, but But for part 3, make sure you look deep in the draft classes. You'll find something that sticks out in each one of them if you look deep enough, and that's what I'll be writing about on Tuesday.